Hello indie game fans, a common question that I see in the comments is people asking the difference between roguelites, L-I-T-E, and roguelike, L-I-K-E, with people getting confused due to the mainstream usage of the term, so settle down and get your notebooks out, since class is in session. To explain the difference, let's take a trip back to 1980, with the granddaddy of them all, a little game called Rogue. It had you delving into the dungeons of doom, seeking the MacGuffin known as the Amulet of Yendor, located at the lowest level of the dungeon, fighting monsters, collecting equipment, drinking potions, and casting spells through the use of magic scrolls. However, if you die, the entire game resets, generating a new dungeon for you to try all over again with a new character, with nothing carrying over. Due to the state of computer technology at the time, there wasn't the ability to have fancy graphics, instead using letters and ASCII symbols like the @ sign or even the exclamation mark to represent monsters and potions. As such, at least to me, this is where the term roguelike comes from, which essentially means games like Rogue, duh. So taking a side-by-side look at this, or this, you can clearly see that they are nothing like Rogue and hence belong in the light category. However, we do have to talk about something which complicates matters. We cannot talk about roguelite without mentioning the Berlin interpretation, which comes from the International Roguelike Development Conference held in Berlin in 2008. According to the wiki, roguelike is a genre which is not merely like Rogue, but rather all fall on a spectrum depending on their features, where missing some of these does not mean it's not a roguelike, and having some of these does not mean it's one as well. Right, that's just the most non-committal waffling that I've seen, and while I'm not one to gatekeep definitions or to be super pedantic about them like r/roguelikes, I do believe that we need to have a common understanding in order to facilitate discussion, hence this video, so let me show you what I mean. According to this interpretation, there are high and low value factors which determine how roguelike a game is, including random environmental generation, permadeath, turn-based, grid-based, non-modal, complexity, resource management, hack and slash, exploration and discovery, and single-player character, monsters that follows the same rules as the player, tactical challenge, ASCII display, dungeons, and numbers. Low value being low value, let's remove them from the equation and focus on these 9. The first two are found in all roguelike and light games, or permadeath and procedural generation, which is quite self-explanatory and critical in the definition. Non-modality is an interesting one, which says that you need to have all actions available to you at all times. Complexity is important as well, since I've seen many arcade-style titles being referred to as roguelite, which is clearly wrong. Think Asteroids or Space Invaders, for example. Resource management is a given, whether you're managing potions, resources like bombs and ropes, or some form of currency and so on, which is more or less present in all games. Hack and slash broadly means killing a lot of monsters, which I suppose is a given for this genre as well, and exploration and discovery refers to exploration of dungeons, a given, and the discovery of unidentified items like potions. The crux of my definition centers around turn-based and grid-based, which I believe in order to be like Rogue, these are non-negotiable factors, which means that everything else falls under light. As such, I've gathered some of the best roguelikes in this section, including classics like Ancient Domains of Mystery, Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, NetHack and Angband, to older but still new games like Dungeon Mans, Cataclysm, Dark Days Ahead, Tales of March Eao, Sword of the Stars, The Pit, and Dungeons of Dreadmore, to more recent entries like Cogmine, Caves of Quad, Tango Deep, Golden Krone Hotel, Yodanji, and even Stone Shard, all of which, some more than others, do look and play very much like the original Rogue, with some interesting edge cases like Crypt of the Necrodancer, which is technically turn-based but you do have a timer in having to move on the beat. Roguelikes were humming along nicely as a sort of niche genre from the 80s to 2000s, and then came along Spelunky, now retroactively known as Spelunky Classic, released as a freeware title in 2008 from developer Derek Yu, which has often been credited with changing the game. The tough-as-nails platformer provided an easy access point for many players, and that while it looks simple enough, collect gold, fight monsters, and save the damsel in distress as you got deeper and deeper into the caves, the combination of the brutal difficulty and the fact that you restarted on 1-1 with no continues or extra lives sparked something in people in wanting to master and beat the game. Confusingly, in order to differentiate itself from roguelikes mentioned in the previous section, the term roguelike came about, which are games that are like roguelikes but not necessarily like Rogue, which is where the confusion comes in. The developer of Rogue Legacy, coincidentally the title that got me into indie games, coined the term Rogue-lite, L-I-T-E, only borrowing some elements from Rogue, having a similar great taste but without the calories, so to speak. In hindsight, it's not a great term given how similar the two words sound, but it is what it is. Interestingly, a feature of modern roguelites is the addition of unlockable items and even permanent meta progression, all of which were not present in earlier roguelike titles, which is a topic for discussion for another day, but is a notable but not essential element of what makes a roguelite title. The rest, as they say, is history, since the combination of an audience willing to take on challenging games, the rising wave of indie games, and that procedural generation meant that smaller teams could potentially create an infinitely replayable experience has led to one hit after the next. There's been a movement by roguelike fans and developers to properly classify and group games as they are, proposing the traditional roguelike versus action roguelike framework, but that has not taken off, so at least on this channel, this is where I'm at. Roguelikes are games like Rogue, examples mentioned earlier, and is somewhat of a dying genre since we do get but a handful of these every year, with gamers preferring the alternative as seen by massive sales numbers. For roguelites, however, this is where things get interesting. Developers have been trying to mash together roguelike elements and genres in every way that they can, hoping to stumble upon that next magical combo that will bring them success, where I refer to them as follows. Action roguelites are your top-down or isometric action-adventure games that look similar to a Zelda title, so Hades, The Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, Nuclear Throne, and so on. Roguelite platformers are 2 or 3D platformers like Rogue Legacy, Splunky, Dead Cells, and Scourgebringer. Roguelite deck builders are games like Slay the Spire, Monster Train, or Griftlands. Roguelite tactics titles are games like Into the Breach, Warriors of the Now, and Other Side. Roguelite first-person shooters covers games like Gunfire Reborn, RoboQuest, and BPM Bullets Per Minute. Roguelite RPGs includes games like Star Renegades and World of Horror. Roguelite strategy games includes Crying Suns and Curious Expedition. Roguelite city builders includes Dream Engines, Nomad Cities, and the upcoming Against the Storm. And roguelite beat-em-ups are titles like Rampage Knight and Lost Castle. However, one of the wonders of indie games is that developers and genres continue to evolve, mixing and matching parts from everything, such as Demon Crawl, technically a roguelite minesweeper which should not fulfill the complexity portion, but it does, Dicey Dungeons, which is not exactly a deck builder and not exactly an RPG, Retropolis, which mixes deck builder, city builder, and side-scrolling defense, The Last Spell, which is technically turn-based and grid-based, but has city building, RPG elements, and a defense component, and a great example from earlier this year is Loop Hero, one that has elements of deck building, technically turn-based combat, a strategy portion in how you place your cards, but also has an equipment system. As such, you can see the sheer variety of experiences in the roguelite space, where things only look to get more creative and interesting in the years to come. Despite the existence of this video, I'm sure that the confusion will continue on, with many people who either cannot be bothered or don't want to get into the weeds with the details, and then there's search engine algorithms, since many people still search for roguelike games, which leads to unwieldy video titles like this. Still, if you've watched this far, I do hope you get a better understanding of what is a roguelite. For examples of the best, watch these videos and I will see you after the jump.